Hello, and thank you for taking the time to watch this short demonstration on placing posterior composites. I wanted to share some of the tips that I've learned while studying for my restorative diploma at the Royal College of Surgeons, and also from talking to colleagues and doing some extra study. So I hope you enjoy. So obviously I'm doing this outside of the mouth, so of course it is much easier. I placed a rubber dam to secure the tooth. If you want to, of course, you can place a clamp in front of the tooth that you are going to be restoring. What I was doing there was I was just measuring the depth of the cavity. It's really important to know that because you need to know how deep the material will cure. So this is a bulk fill Henry Schein composite, and by looking on their website, I know that the bulk fill cures for 4 millimeters. So I want to ensure that I don't restore or I don't place more than a 4 millimeter increment. So I place some bulk composite in there, and I'm just patting it down to get that nice and smooth with a packer. Once you've got that nice and smooth, what I'm doing here is I'm just measuring the remainder of the cavity because I know I'm going to be placing a layering composite over the top, and I know that this layering composite only cures to a depth of 2 to 2.5 millimeters. So make sure you check the depth and then light cure. So this is the light cured composite. So it's just one increment, 4 millimeters. Now I'm placing the genial layering composite over the top. Genial is available to order. So I had measured the depth of the remainder of the cavity, which is no more than 2 to 2.5 millimeters. So you just place that really roughly over the top, remove any obvious excess. You're not really worried about the anatomy at the moment. You just want to get the bulk of the material on there. And now with a instrument, I'm using a burnisher here, but you can use a flat plastic, you can use a probe, you can use whatever instrument you prefer to use. All I'm doing is I'm removing the excess composite, but I'm following the cusp anatomy. So I'm following the contours of the cusps. So I'm angling the instrument, just gently following the contours of the cusp, and then using it just to pack the composite into the cusps very gently. One of the good things I found with this composite, with the genial composite, is what you can do is it either comes in a capsule or it comes in a tube, and you can roll out the tube, really put it onto a glass slab, manipulate it with your flat plastic just to really mold it and get it to start flowing a bit better before you pop it onto the tooth. So what you can see on the screen now is taken from Style Italiano, who I think is amazing. So please do visit their website. They do courses as well. What Style Italiano have done is they've mapped out the morphology and the anatomy of all posterior teeth, and they've condensed it to some essential lines. So for example, for the upper 6, there's only 3 lines that you would need to carve into or shape into the composite. And you could do that for the premolars and the second molar as well. Again, this is taken from Style Italiano. What this slide shows is when you're carving out or when you're placing the composite and trying to shape the composite, try and look for the remainder of the fissures. That's what the picture on the left shows. So mark out the remainder of the fissures. I mean, you can do that physically, or you can do that in your mind, so you know where those fissures end. And you just sort of put points there so that you know where the fissures will end eventually, and figure out where the center of the tooth is. And all you're doing using the essential lines is using the center of the tooth and just working outwards and joining those dots. So figure out where the fissures end, figure out the center of the tooth, and keep those endpoints in mind, and then use that to carve out the anatomy. I'll show you how I apply that to this tooth here. So I've just removed the excess following the contour of the teeth, of the cusps. Okay, so according to using Style Italiano guide, 3 lines for a upper 6. I'm looking to see where the fissures will end. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm just marking that. Sorry, it goes out of focus a little bit here, but it will come back. So what I've just marked, I'm just joining those marks up using the 3 lines that I referred to in the previous diagram by Style Italiano. So that's 1 line. And it's very gentle. I'm just gently manipulating the composite, just gently engraving the composite. And because the layer underneath is hard set, you can really go all the way down to that layer. So that's 1 line there, just joined up the 2 marks that I created on the side of the tooth. The second little line in the middle, and this one here is the final essential line. Now, of course, Style Italiano talks about this in a lot of detail, and there's a lot of useful information on their websites, and they do run courses as well. Now, as you can see here, it's starting to take shape, but it's really important to use your instrument and follow the contours of the cusp. It still looks a little bit rough now, but just by really gently manipulating the composite, it will start to take shape. You can see there, it's starting to look a little bit better. It's still a little bit rough, but it's definitely starting to take shape. I think looking at it now, that central fissure is a little bit long, so I probably have made that a little bit shorter. So this is great. So this is GC modeling liquid, again, available to order. And the composite flat number 10 brush, again, available to order. So use a really small amount of the modeling liquid. Using the flat number 10 brush, just use it to smooth out any excess composite. So working from the center out to the edges of the cusp tips. And I'm just using it to gently brush on and remove any excess and just smooth out the layer. And you can use it to do a little bit of carving with as well, as long as you're working from the center out and try and not flattening the anatomy that you've just created. But you can see all the excess just gets pushed to the edge, and then you can just remove that with your Explorer. You can see all the excess which has just been pushed to the edge. I've just removed that there. Now at this stage, of course, you can go a little bit further and you can add a little bit more anatomy if you wanted to, into the cusps. You can add a few more ridges if you want to. Of course, it's entirely up to you. So what I'm going to talk through now or demonstrate now is if you have a patient and they attend with a tooth intact but there's decay underneath the enamel, or you've got a really good composite already, so you want to try and match the contours of the existing composite or the existing restoration. And what you can do is a composite stem. So what I did initially was I just painted the surface with some separating medium, some modeling liquid, or some glycerin, whatever you have to hand, and then use a flowable composite or something flowable over the top of the tooth. In this case, I'm using Pro Temp, which is good because it's readily accessible. If you do have some out-of-date flowable composite that you're not going to be using, that's also good to use. You can also use some impression material, but it's not as good. I mean, you can use some putty and create a stamp with the putty, but I do find the Pro Temp is much better to use, and it is readily available. So I've painted over the surface of the tooth with a separating medium. I use the modeling liquid, and then I'm using Pro Temp just to go over the tooth. And then get the end of your brush, your micro brush, and just pop that into the material that you've just spread, that you've just flowed over the tooth. Hold it there until it sets. And then once it's set, lift it off gently. And there you have the composite stamp. So once you've drilled into the cavity, you've drilled into the tooth, you've created your cavity, you've restored the tooth, you've done your bulk fill, and now you're placing the layering composite over the top of your bulk fill material. So you just roughly place it over the top. You don't need to worry about too much. Just try and remove some excess. And I would paint some separating liquid over the composite that you've just placed, some glycerin or some modeling liquid. If you don't have any of that, then PTFE tape just over the surface of the composite, and then use your stamp and squish into the outer layer of the composite that you've just placed. Really squish into it, really try and get some pressure onto there. Don't worry, it should be fine. And there you have quite a nicely contoured composite, and you can just go ahead and remove any excess. Again, use your brush if you want to manipulate the composite a little bit more. So if you're doing a class 2 restoration, the technique is exactly the same. So isolate the tooth, get your matrix band on, wedge in there just so that you've got real good contact, and then you just convert the class 2 to a class 1 by building the interproximal area first and making sure you've got the marginal ridge correct. Again, be wary of the depth of the material, because depending on which material you're going to be using, you want to make sure that it's not over 2 to 2.5 millimeters, otherwise it's not going to cure. So 2 to 2.5 millimeters in depth. So I'm just building out that interproximal wall using my burnisher just to gently shape and manipulate that composite. So essentially I'm creating a creating a class 1 from a class 2. And then you would cure that, make sure you're happy with the marginal ridge, and then take off the band, and then you can restore the rest of the tooth like we were doing with the class 1. So I hope you found that useful. If you do have any questions, then please do contact me via Central Operations. So the materials that we've used are the genial, so the Henry-Schein bulk fill composite, which is really good. The genial composite, which I find really easy to use, especially when you take it out of the tube and really manipulate it. The composite number 10 brush and the GC modeling liquid. All of these materials are available to order. Try them out and give us some feedback. Thank you very much.